We're up to Daf Mem Amud Aleph, and we spoke about the special brachos in the Tefillah of Ne'ilah on Yom Kippurim, and we saw that in general we integrate many different brachos into Birchas Kohanim, meaning the Tzibur, while the Kohanim are reciting their brachos, are reciting their psukim of bracha. And now the Gemara asks, Heichon Amoron. And this you'll see on the fourth line down from the top. It says, Urei vonavin levanecha shalom al Yisrael Heichon Omron. At what point does the tzibur respond? By reading the psukim that we mentioned earlier. Rav Yosef, here we have machlokas, Rav Yosef Omar, Bein kol bracha u bracha. In other words, after each pasuk of the three psukim, for example, at the end of V'yishmerecha or V'chuneka or Shalom, at that point, the tzibur responds by reciting that pasuk. Rav Sheshes Omar, the Rav Sheshes disagrees, and he says, Ba'azkaras Hashem, as soon as the Kohanim mention the name of Hashem in the bracha, like V'yerecha Hashem V'yishmerecha, so after Hashem, the tzibur will recite that pasuk and so on. Kligi bar Rav Mori v'Rav Zvid. The Gemara explains that there's a controversy between Rav Mori and Rav Zvid about how to say these psukim. Chan Omar psuka lekavel psuka. In other words, one pasuk corresponds to another pasuk. So when the Kohanim would recite the first bracha, Yivarecha Hashem V'yishmerecha, then the people would respond with a corresponding pasuk, the first of the three psukim that we mentioned. And that's what they did. After the second bracha, they responded with the second pasuk. After the third, with the third. But for Chanam, according to the second opinion, Akol psuka Amar lehu lekulu. On each pasuk of the three psukim that make up the Birchas Kohanim, the tzibur would respond by reciting all three psukim. So therefore, it would mean that according to this second view, the people would respond 3 times 3. They would say the three psukim 3 times. Amar Rav Chia bar Abba, these psukim were not established to be recited outside the Beis Hamikdash. It's only in the Beis Hamikdash, that's where we recite these psukim. Because in the Beis Hamikdash, the Birchas Kohanim was recited with the Shem HaMiyuchad, with the Yud Kei Vav Kei. So that's why they were masaking these psukim as a shevach to extol the name of God. If he responds in Gvulim by reading these psukim, he's making a mistake. Now Tosfos, the Ramasel Kol, comes to the conclusion that he's not even permitted to recite these psukim in Gvulim. However, Rashi seems to assume that he has the option. It's up to his discretion. There's no prohibition to respond with these psukim in Gvulim. However, they never made a takana to require the response with these psukim other than in the Mikdash itself. Some, however, say that even according to Rashi, since there's no need and no obligation to recite these psukim outside the Mikdash and Gvulim, in Mela, it becomes asur, because they're not going to be able to hear properly the brachos of the Kohanim if they're too busy reciting these psukim. And they're not even necessary outside of the Mikdash. Now the Gemara quotes a second view. Amar Rab Chanina bar Papa, even in the Mikdash, we should not be saying these psukim at all. Teda, and I'll prove it to you. The Mikdash nami lo mi boy lememra, that even in the Mikdash we should not recite these psukim. Klum yeshcha evet shemevarchem also v'eino mazin. If he's so busy and he's preoccupied with responding with these psukim, he won't be meticulous. He won't be careful about hearing the psukim and the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Adon, is now bestowing the psukim through the agency of the Kohanim. He should be exclusively focused on the brachos of the Kohanim. And now we have another view, a third view, which is the most extreme in the other direction, the polar opposite of Rab Chanina bar Papa, Amrav Acha bar Chanina. He holds that even outside the Beis Hamikdash, where they don't recite the bracha with the Shem HaMiyuchad, nevertheless, we should be responding with these psukim. Teda, the B'Gvula Nami Boy L'Memra, even in Gvula and outside the Mikdash, we are required to recite these brachas. When the servant is receiving a blessing from his master, he has to show his master how important that blessing is to him, how beloved it is to him. He cherishes it. And therefore, he wants to sort of give back to the Adon, to his master, and therefore he should be reciting these psukim, because that's called Masbir Ponim. He's being Masbir Ponim l'Rabba. He's showing how important and how beloved these brachas are in his eyes. Initially, my minig was to recite these psukim during Birchas Kohanim, but when I realized that the famous Rabbi Abba Demin Ako, about whom we're going to learn in the next Gemara, would omit these psukim, anonami lo aminu. I stopped saying these psukim. Okay. Now, Rabbi Avo, as we just saw, followed in the footsteps of Rabbi Abba Demin Ma'ako. So at this point in the Gemara is going to go through a whole discussion here about how Rabbi Avo, when he compared himself to Rabbi Abba Demin Ako, he realized that he was like not fit to shine a candle. Even though Rabbi Avo thought that he himself had a great contribution to make. Rabbi Avo Meresh Havamina in Vesonana. I used to think of myself as an Anav. We'll see exactly how that Anava came to the fore in a story about the Amora who used to say over Rabbi Avo's Torah and blast it out so the people could hear it. But Keva de Chazinole Rabbi Avo Minako, when I realized and I became aware of the Midas Anova of Rabbi Abba Demin Ma'ako, who, as we'll soon see, his derech was that when the Chacham would dorish the Rabbim, he would say the drasha over the lachash in a whisper to the Meturgamon, and the Meturgamon would then blast it out to the Rabbim. The Amar Iu Hai Taima of Yomar Maroi Chad Time. The Mitargim would not pass on and transmit what he heard from the Amora, in this case, Rabbi Abba Demina Ako. So Rabbi Abba Demina Ako is publicly presenting a drasha. He whispers it into the ears of the Miturgamon, and guess what? The Miturgamon says something totally different. He gives his own twist. He changes from what he heard from the Rebbe, in this case Rabbi Abba, and this is a real zilzal in the covet of Rabbi Abba. And lo kapid, and yet Rabbi Abba was not makpid. Because of his great humility, he would continue to do what he did and continue to deliver the drasha in his particular understanding, and allowing the Mitargim to go ahead, and change and alter what he had said. And all of a sudden, Rabbi Avo realizes that I can't shine a candle to the level of anova, of humility of this Rabbi Abba. Amina lav amvenosana. And I realized that I'm not relative to Rabbi Abba. I'm not none of it all. So again, initially, Rabbi Avo thought I was a humble person. Mayan venuse de Rabbi Avo. And what was his humility? The Amra le de Besu Damoroi de Rabbi Avo, le de Besu de Rabbi Avo. The wife of the Amora, that's the one who blasted out the Matargimin, of Rabbi Avo, said to the wife of Rabbi Avo, my husband, the Meturgaman, he doesn't need to hear the Torah from your husband. He's enough of a chacham that even without your husband, he could give the drasha. But why does he bend over to listen, puts his ear to the mouth of Rabbi Avo to hear what Rabbi Avo is saying? He's giving kavod to an elder statesman. So the wife of Rabbi Avo tells over what she heard from the wife of the Meturgaman, Amalei, and listen to the response of Rabbi Avo, what difference does it make? Who cares whether he thinks that he could say better than me? Minei minei is kalis ilah. Ilah means the Ribono Shalom up on high. He says there's a Shevach HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whether it's the way I wanted to say it in public or the way he gave it over in the public. In both cases, no matter how you slice the cake, there was a Kiddush Shem Shamayim, and therefore I don't care. I'm not going to be makpid on him, even if he's mizalzel in my covenant. Visu, and another story, Rabbi Avo Imnu Rabbanan Alei Limamnei Reisha. The Rabbanan wanted to appoint him as the Rosh Hashiva, but came into Chazia, he saw Rabbi Avo, that Rabbi Abba Min Ako, who's a poor person, Nefishile Bali Chovos, and many people are after him to pay up the debts that he owes them. Amalahu, Rabbi Avo turns to the Chachamim and he says, don't appoint me as Rosh Hashiva. Ika Rabba, there's some great Chacham who supersedes me in his expertise in Torah knowledge. He should be appointed as the Rosh Hashiva. And that's Rabbi Abba bin Minako. And again, the reason why Rabbi Avo said this is because they used to shower gifts and financial benefits on the Rosh Hashiva. And Rabbi Abba de Minako was a very poor person. So Rabbi Avo wanted Rabbi Abba de Minako to be appointed Rosh Hashiva, and then they would give him the financial support and save him from his destitutes. And we find something parallel with regard to the Kohen Gadol. In Vayikra Chav Aleph HaKohen HaGadol Me'achav, the Gemara says in Yoma Daf Yudches, Gadlu Mishal Achav. Rabbi Avov, Rabbi Chia bar Abba Iklal Ahu Asra. Rabbi Avo, together with Rabbi Chia bar Abba, found themselves in a certain place, and the people would be mechabed, both of them, to give a drasha. This one gave a drasha in this base medrash, let's say Rabbi Chia, and Rabbi Avo gave his drasha in another base medrash. Rabbi Avo dorish bagadata. He would darshan binyonei agada, and Rabbi Chia bar Abba dorish b'shmaita binyonei aloch, like Dini Momenos, Dini Yisra Beheter, Tuma Vitara, Shavkua, Kuli Amal, Rabbi Chia bar Abba, V'yozul Gabi Rabbi Avo, and the entire populace left Rabbi Chia bar Abba's halachic discourse, and instead they attended the Agadic discourse, the presentation of Rabbi Avo. Cholish Daiti, Rabbi Chia bar Abba got down about it. He had a lot of emotional sour pain that they left him, and Rabbi Avo wanted to now be mefayis him to console him. Amalei, he gives him a double-edged consolation, and he says the following: you know why they left your drasha and they came to hear my drasha? It's not because they machshiv me or my Torah more than yours. Let's say you have two people selling, and one person puts out a sign, all the prices are slashed, it's a great sale. The other person is selling it at a high price. Shnei b'nei Adam, echad mocher avanim tovos. One is selling expensive jewelry and expensive stones. Echad mocher minei sidkis. Sidkis are basically tools that a woman uses, or a poor person, like needles and so forth and so on, that are used to weave a garment, and it's very, very cheap. Almi Koftzim, where do the people gravitate? Lo al Sidkis, they want to get a cheap deal. There's a sale. All items must go. Slash prices 50% off, 90% off. So what does that prove? Does that prove that the person who's selling Sidkis is really selling better schora? On the contrary. And therefore, in the Nimshal, your divrei halacha that you're darshaning are like avonim tovos. Not everyone has the ability to acquire and understand dvar halacha. Dvar halacha is omek, is deep, and they need a great deal of yishuv hadas to listen. It's a lot harder. So where do they go? They go to the cheap store, to divrei agada. That's much easier to understand. And that's Masechet daito shel adam. That's why the people left you. Furthermore, says Rabbi Avo, again in his attempt to be Mefayes Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Kol Yoma Hava Malava Rabbi Chia bar Abba Rabbi Avo Adush Pize. It was Rabbi Chia bar Abba who gave cover to Rabbi Avo, and he walked Rabbi Avo home to his lodging. Mikum diikara de Bei Kesa, because Rabbi Avo, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the city of Caesarea, he got all this kavod. He was Mekurav of Malchus. But Ahu Yoma, on that day that Rabbi Chia bar Abba suffered from Chalishas Hadas, and Rabbi Avo wanted to be Mefayes Daito, Alve Rabbi Avo, just the opposite. Rabbi Avo accompanied, escorted Rabbi Chia bar Abba Adush Pize to his lodging. Afilu Hachi, despite all these great attempts on the part of Rabbi Avo to be Mefayes Rabbi Chia bar Abba lo isosiv daita minei, he did not achieve a state of Yishuv Hadas. Now, back on Daf Lamed Tes, we were dealing with the psukim that the Tzibur would recite during the Birchas Kohanim. And now the Gemara wants to analyze the nusach that the Kol would recite during Modim, when the Shliach Tzibur got to Modim. The underlying premise of the Gemara that we're about to learn is that every single person individually should be thanking and expressing gratitude to Hashem. And therefore, when the Shliach Tzibur Omer Modim, then what would the people respond? It's not enough that they appointed the Shliach Tzibur to represent them as their proxy. Ha'am Bayim Omer, there's got to be some nusach of thanksgiving that the Tzibur themselves would express their gratitude and partner with the Shliach Tzibur in that Odot HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Avudraham says that is Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shemaim. Every person individually has to be Makabel Ol Malchus Shemaim. It's not a full-fledged Kabbalah when a person relies on the Shliach. However, others interpret that Birchas Hodah needs a partnership on the part of the Tzibur to be modeh together with the Tzibur. And the reason for that is that just like with Modim D'Rabbanan, they established a Hishtachavo L'chroa, he has to bow, and if he's bowing, then he already should be saying Divrei Shevach V'Odoyah. Mitzvah Rabba Zu Lahodos L'Hashem Ein Lach Mitzvah. We should not be missing a great opportunity to extol and express our thanksgiving to the Ribono Shel Olam, Amar Rav. And now we're going to have a whole list of shitos as to what constitutes Modim D'Rabbanan when the Shliach Tzibur gets to Modim. Amar Rav, Modim Anachnu Lach Hashem Elokeinu Al Sha'anu Modim. We thank you, Hashem, that you gave it within us, in our hearts, the ability, the belief, and the faith, and the desire, and the capability to be davuk b'cha, to be close to you, lahodos l'cha, so that we can express our thanks. Shmuel Amar, Shmuel agrees to Rav, but he adds another two words. Modav anachnu lach Hashem Elokeinu, Elokei kol basar. He adds those words, Elokei kol basar, al sha'anu modim lo. And what that means is that the very fact that we are flesh and blood, this is a great opportunity that God has given us to become close to the Almighty, to the Infinite, and express that thanksgiving. Rav Simi Omer, it's not enough to say Elokei Kol Basar, but you have to add Yotzreinu Yotze Bereshis Al Shanoch Nemodim Lo. And Ardoi Amri Mishmei to Rabbi Simoi, he should add brachos vodos l'shimcha gadol al shechi sonu v'kiyam tonu al shanu modim lo. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, he has the largest Sotah. Messiah b'hochi kein techayenu s'chananenu u'skabtzenu v'sesof kol yosenu l'chatzus kodshecha l'shmorchu kecha v'lasos u'tzonecha b'lev shalem al sha'anu modim lo. So the Keren Ora tries to explain why this great lengthy Hosafah and the Amoraim, each expanding on the previous Amora in terms of the Birchas Hodah. Rav was of the opinion, Modim Anachnu Loch, we have a responsibility and obligation to thank you that you gave us the Das, the Seichel, Lahodas L'cha, the capability to praise you. Shmuel Mosif Elokei Kol Basar. Why does Shmuel add Elokei Kol Basar? Ki tachlis brias kol basar b'shvil Yisrael shenivru lahodas l'shmo Yisrael. That the ultimate purpose of the creation of all human beings is for the sake of Yisrael, that were created to be model l'shmo agadol. Rav Simoi would add Yotzreinu Yotze Bereshis, because the tachlis of the entire Yitzir is b'shvil Amo Yisrael Amodim L'Shmo. And this is reflected in the famous Ramban in his commentary at the end of Parshas Bo, where he says, Lefichach Omru, he quotes the Mishnah in the second parak of Avos, Havizor b'mitzvah kala kivachamura, shekulam chamudos v'chavivos miot, shebechol shah adam modu b'hen le'lokav, v'kavanoso, kavanas kol mitzvahs, shenamin be'elokeinu menoda elav, shehu bra'anu. V'hi hakavana b'yitzira. Ein lanu tama acher b'yitzira rishona. V'ein kel elyon chafetz v'tachtonim ulvad sheyeda ha'adam v'yodeh le'elokav shebro v'kavanas romus hakol b'tfilos kavanas batei knisios u'sklus tfilos ravim sheyeh l'bnei adam makom sheyiskabtzu v'yodu lekel shebro'am v'himtziam v'yefarnesu u'yefarsem zeh v'yomel l'fanecha b'yosecha anachnu. Nardoi adds brachos vodos al shechi sonu, because in the original doros before Matan Torah, all of those doros were machis. They generated divine wrath. They were rishoyim in their lifetime who were kruyim mesim, and therefore no delishmo nevarch al shechi sonu v'kimanu al yedei yitzis mitzrayim Matan Torah nosan banu chius amitis lahodos l'shmo. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov Messiah came to chayenu. Ki adayin lo nishlat koach achius hazeh lahodos lo hodah shlema. Ad shenizkel liyes kates ve'asof gol yosenu v'naseh ritzono b'lev of shalom v'oz tiyah hodah b'shlemus. And that's the addition here of Rav Acha Bar Yaakov of Kaptzenu v'sesof gel yosenu l'chatzus kodshecha, etc. Om Rabbi Yitzchak liom tehei emas tzibur olecha. And now we're going to have a machlokes, excuse me, a three-way machlokes about how do we derive the principle that a person should always be afraid of the tzibur. I once asked my father, Zechron Levuch, he darshened in front of the tzibur almost a half a century, and I asked him if he had emas tzipura, because I thought, he gets up, he has such confidence. No, he said, every single time I speak, I have emas tzibura. I'm afraid of the tzibur. So Yitzchak derives this principle from the Kohanim, because pneim klape ha'am, they face the people, achoreim klape shechina, their back, each one of them is towards the heichal. And even though they are turning around and facing towards the people with their back towards the Shechina, which is not their kavod, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mevater on his kavod in order that the Kohanim should see the people. Because when they see the people, they are overwhelmed by a sense of Emasa de Tzibura. Like we mentioned that story about the Chofetz Chaim when he saw that Reb Chaim Ozer was in the Tzibur and he was overwhelmed by Pachad. So even though the Kohanim are, in a sense, they're on the hierarchy of Kedusha, they're greater than the Yisrael, but nevertheless, they still have to have Emas HaTzibur Aleim. How much more so Shar B'nai Adam? Rav Nachman Omer Hochi, he has a different source from which he derives Emas Tzibur. The Pasuk in Divrei Yomim says, Vayokom David HaMelech al Raglo, Vayomer Shma'uni Achai ve'ami. What's the difference between Achai and Ami? Achai, brotherhood, is an expression of friendship. But Ami, my people, my nation, is an expression of Malchus, meaning that you are subservient to me. So the Gemara asks the following question. Rav Nachman's kasha is there's an apparent contradiction here. Im achai lo mami, v'im ami lo machai. There's a contradiction between the two. If it's achai, then it's not ami. If it's ami, it's not achai. Amar Abelazar, in order to reconcile this apparent contradiction, Amar lahem David Yisrael, im atem shomim li, if you'll be dedicated to Avodas Hashem, and you will contribute towards the building of the Beis HaMikdash, then achayatem, I can consider you my colleagues, my friends. V'im lav, but if not going to listen to me, you're not going to obey, and you're not going to reach the shleimus of Avodas Hashem, amiyatem, then anirode eschem b'makel. I'm going to have the responsibility as the king to be kovesh, to implement b'kfiyah with coercion to make sure that you will straighten your ways and dedicate yourself to Avodas Hashem. And from this we learn that there has to be an emas hatzibur even with regard to the melech, which means the following, that if the amak sherim, then they're called achai. But if they're not, it's ami. Rabbanan Amri, Rabbanan say, you know what? I have another source from which I derive the emas tzibur should be mutelas ala odom ehochad. The Torah Rabbanan. Ein hakodim hashoyim lalos sandaleim laduchan. When they used to wear the sandalim on their feet, they used to get dirty with mud and so forth and so on. And if the Kohen would go up with his sandalim, then, as we'll soon see, Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai was worried about the fact that the tzibur would be repulsed, and they would sort of like make fun of the Kohanim. Look at their dirty sandalim, because when the Kohanim lift up their hands, the duchen, their cloak sort of gets lifted up, and their feet are exposed. In Rosh Hashanah Daf Lamed Aleph, we have a list of 9 takonos she'iskin Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, and one of them is going to be that the Kohanim cannot duchen with their sandalim on their femai taimo lav mishum kavod hatzibur. And before Rav Ashi rejects this, the Gemara thinks right now that the takon of Rav Yochanan Zakkai is mishum kavod hatzibur, that it's not kavod hatzibur for the tzibur to see the sandalim of the Kohanim that are mluchlachim betit. So you see that the Kohen has to worry about a Masa de Tzibura, about the kavod of the Tzibur. Just 1 second. Now, just one line here in the name of the Maharsha, which I forgot. I omitted this with regard to Rav Nachman. Rayas Rav Nachman hi mimasha kam hamelch al raglov l'kvod hatzibur. It's from the fact that it says about David HaMelech vayokom David HaMelech al raglov, and that was kavod hatzibur. Ha'isa emas tzibur olav. Omer Rav Ashi lo. There's no proof from the fact that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made that takana, because Hasan is a whole other reason why the Kohen has to take off his sandalim. Shema nifsaka lo retzua b'sandal. Maybe the strap around his sandal that connects the sandal to his foot would get ripped. He's going to be embarrassed to go up to Duchen because people are making fun of him. They see he's got a ripped sandal. And then he's going to go back to his place in order to tie the sandal properly. And in the meantime, his colleagues, so the Kohanim, have already completed the bracha. And not only that, when the people see that he didn't go up there because he went down and he didn't go up on time, Amri, they're going to spread rumors about him that Ben Grusha ben Chalutzu, maybe he's Pasal L'Kahuna. Now, the Mishnah says that there's a fundamental difference between Birchas Kohanim outside the Mikdash and in the Mikdash. And the Mishnah establishes that the Mikdash, bracha achas. So we'll explain this in just a minute.